When we say isn't meeting the drinking water standards, that sounds quite frightening. But when you break it down and you actually read the Ministry of Health report, it looks at 4 criteria, doesn't it, for meeting these standards?
There are three principal ones. One is bacteria, one is protozoa or viruses, and one is chemical standards.
Yeah, and the other one is having a water safety plan.
That's correct.
Okay, so let's look at those. The bacteria standard was met by 96.2% for 96.2% of people. The safety plan we talked about, 97%. The chemical standard, 97%. The outlier is the one you mentioned, the protozoa standard, and 83% met that. So statistically, you can say that 81% met all the standards, but there's only one real outlier there, isn't it?
Yeah,
The protozoa standard.
The point, of course, is that it was the protozoa infection that caused the Havelock outbreak. So while you're technically correct, what it shows is that as we get down into smaller communities in New Zealand, the quality of the water that they're getting is not demonstrably safe. And that might be acceptable to the people who live in small communities like Punakaiki or Coromandel or Whangamata or places like that. But essentially these are also large tourist destinations. So we're also supplying water to a very large number of foreign tourists and local tourists.
But just to be clear though, protozoa was not found in those water supplies. The report specifically says it doesn't necessarily mean that pathogenic protozoa like your giardias and your cryptosporidiums were present in the water. It was just that they hadn't monitored it appropriately, that if it was there, they would have been able to combat it.
Well, at the end of the day, the important thing is that if we have standards, and these standards have been set by technical experts with international advice, the important thing is that people actually meet them, that the councils that are involved and responsible for the actual monitoring of water supplies are actually doing their job. And in our view, it lends weight to the inquiry's recommendations that we need an independent regulator to actually oversee the monitoring and enforcement.
Okay, but do you have skin in the game here as Water New Zealand? I mean, you are a lobby group for the industry which does this work.
Well, we're interested in the sense that we're interested in the outcomes from a public health perspective. We don't get any government funding for the work we do. We're funded by our membership base. Part of our job.
Are the people who do the chlorination work members of yours?
Absolutely, yes. And
okay,
it's
so
quite
this
clear
is quite important for our listeners, because a lot of people hear the word Water New Zealand and they think it's just maybe some semi-official body, but you are representing the interests, and indeed a Water New Zealand member won the Christchurch chlorination contract. So you are representing the members who do this work.
We do, and we've been absolutely clear that at the end of the day, that these companies that are in business to represent, to provide water quality, either technical advice or engineering advice or equipment or chemical supplies, are in the business to make money. I mean, we've never been.
And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just giving our listeners a fair treatment of exactly who
that's
you are
correct.
and what you do.
We also represent the water supply managers of the 67 councils in New Zealand who provide us with the sort of background to the basis on which we'd undertake our work.
And is it your position that all water should be chlorinated in New Zealand?
That's our position. Well, not necessarily chlorinated, but treated with what we call a multiple barrier approach, and that's reflected in the.
So you want all water in New Zealand chlorinated?
No, we want it treated. It doesn't necessarily have to be chlorinated, but you can.
And your members, and again, this is not sinister. It's just that this is your interest. It's information people need to know, because if you look at Christchurch, it's $20,000 a month to chlorinate their water. So your members stand to gain tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars from this.
That's correct. Yeah. But on the other hand, what it results in is a quality of water that the community can have confidence in. I mean, to us,
I just wonder whether you're overblowing a little bit the safety issue here, where most of these numbers are met right up to close to 100%. Quickly through them. The source protection, that is protecting your water supply, 99.4% if you look at the detail of the Ministry of Health report. Adequate records kept by 99.8%. Monitoring, 90% met. Most of these numbers, apart from the outlier we talked about, are pretty bloody good.
They are for large communities, but what the results clearly show that as you go down into smaller communities, you get far worse compliance with the standards than you do for large communities. No one is disputing the fact that in Auckland and Wellington and places like Dunedin, there's 100% compliance with the standards all the time. But as we get down into smaller communities where we're exposing foreign tourists and local tourists to this drinking water, we've got compliance levels down around the 30-35% level. And all we're saying is that along with the inquiry's recommendations that came out about 8 months ago, we think we can do better than that. And we think that in a first world country, that's not an unreasonable expectation.
Thanks for your time this morning. John Pfahlert, the Chief Executive of Water New Zealand, 28 minutes past 7.
And you're listening to Morning Report. The Acting Prime Minister, Winston Peters, is defending the integrity of an inquiry into